Now to him who by the power at work within us is able to accomplish abundantly far more than we can ask or imagine. Amen. It seemed like idle talk, this hope of resurrection. I mean, at that moment, the lives of the disciples were pretty lousy. It was the 18th year of the reign of the Emperor Tiberius, and they just watched their friend and teacher executed. They left their families and livelihoods to follow him, and now had no future. Their hopes for the freedom of Israel had crumbled, and the disciples were terrified and grieving, and now these women come running up with this idle tale of Jesus' resurrection. There's enthusiasm from the crowd, resurrection. But what do they know? For the disciple Peter, it occurred to him that perhaps there was some truth to the women's tale. He raced out to the tomb and discovered it empty, just as the women had told him. He was amazed. This is crazy. He could imagine all sorts of possibilities of what would have happened now that Jesus had died, but this was not on his radar at all. God came out of left field. Resurrection. And now another story. It seemed like idle talk, this hope of resurrection. I mean, at that moment, my life was pretty lousy. It was 2007, and I was an unemployed 43-year-old single mom with 2 small kids living with my parents. The kids were anxious. My dad's dementia was getting bad. Mom was on edge, and I was going through a divorce. My ex and I weren't dividing up assets, but debts. I met with Bishop Tom to try to find work, but there were no churches available. I was discouraged, yet my therapist encouraged me with hopes of resurrection, that things were likely to get better. What does he know? For me, I tried having faith that things would improve, and bit by bit they did. I helped my mom get in-home care for Dad, giving Mom some freedom. We got the kids settled into a routine, and they made friends. And in an effort to find work, I attended clergy conference that spring. I hoped to make some connections to help with the job hunt. The first night there, I attended a reception with the other clergy, but I didn't know a soul in the room. I was nervous and tried to look like I belonged, but I was feeling inadequate. And suddenly, this tall, handsome man called out to me. At first, I thought he was talking to someone behind me, but, oh, you're talking to me. And that week, we became friends. A few months later, we started dating. And next Sunday, we will be celebrating our 12th wedding anniversary. My dear husband, Bill, emerged out of one of the darkest times of my life. I was amazed. It was crazy. I could imagine all sorts of possibilities of what would have happened when I became divorced and unemployed. But finding a husband at clergy conference, that hotbed of romance, was not on my radar at all. God came out of left field. Resurrection. Once the Episcopal Bishop Daniel Corrigan was asked if he believed in resurrection. He responded, "Believe in it? I've seen it too many times not to." Because you see, death and resurrection are a pattern of life. Jesus lived out what we all experience from God on a regular basis. Do we pay attention to that? What intractable challenges have you faced? And surprisingly, we're healed. When in life have you been blocked and suddenly, unexpectedly, a door was opened? Over and over again, we as humans face tremendous challenges from which we can see no way forward. Yet Easter morning reminds us that repair and restoration are possible, often in ways that we can't even imagine. The Lutheran pastor Nadia Bolz-Weber writes, "The Christian faith is really about death and resurrection. It is about how God continues to reach into the graves that we dig for ourselves and pull us out, giving us new life in ways both dramatic and small." Which reminds me of the wonderful Eastern Orthodox depictions of the resurrection. Because here in the West, we tend to show pictures of the empty tomb, or the women seeing the angels, or the resurrected Jesus. In the East, however, they depict Jesus descending to the dead, as we recite in the Nicene Creed, and pulling up Adam and Eve out of their graves. It's a symbolic representation that Christ isn't the only one who resurrects, but that everyone participates in his rising. He wants to free humanity from all that enslaves us. So Jesus' suffering and rising from the dead is not an idle tale that happened one time, but a truth about God that is reflected in our lives daily. I can speak to it regarding my new life after divorce. We all have our stories of finding resurrection even after hitting a wall. Christ doesn't prevent us from suffering and creating our own hells on earth. We have free will. But Christ does suffer alongside us, and then afterwards knocks down every barrier to lift us up, often in unexpected ways. He conquers death and hell. Nothing is impossible with God. Hallelujah! Christ is risen, and we've all been invited into the story.